Good evening, everybody. Welcome, Misha, to our special group, our beautiful group. Is that good? And I am so happy that this evening is happening. Finally, it feels like finally, that we have two of our beautiful elders with us. Two men that have really paved the way for queer liberation, for gay liberation. And for me, that is such, there's something that's so, where I so deeply bow and honor your paths, knowing that as much ease as there is for the next generations is because we follow in your footsteps, and that is a huge gift.
Really lovely,
and to have your wisdom and your life experience and your stories and your presence for this whole week and now this evening. And Michael will start with about 15 minutes of sharing from his life, and then Tim will take it and guide us through a very special ritual about queer ancestors. And
Thank you so much.
like this.
The lovely introduction was mostly correct, mostly right. There's one little change. I am going to talk about my experiences, but it's not really about my story. I want to illustrate or embody common experiences of the gay scene in the United States and later Europe from the 70s onward. And why? Well, there are three good reasons for you. And they all happened in the last 3 or 5 days since we came here. I think it was yesterday that the Trump administration has struck all LGBTQ suicide prevention hotlines and the support that goes with them. So I guess they don't really understand the message that suicide is common among queer teens, among us. Also, the Supreme Court of the United States upheld that about half of our states, lower courts, can continue what they had agreed on, that trans care and support will be stricken. One of you, maybe it was Kobe, said, oh, homophobia has now been morphed into transphobia, and that's really true, at least in the United States. What I experience as homophobia is a lot like what's now happening with trans. Let's beat up the trans people. And thirdly, in the last 5 days since we got here, the Southern Baptist Convention has agreed to overturn gay marriage. These are the same people who designed the overturning of abortion rights, and they succeeded. They're the same people. So these stories are not just about us, they're also a warning. This happened, and it could happen again. I'm much calmer now than when I told my childhood little gay Iowa farm boy stories the other day. So we can leapfrog over a lot of that to 1980. I was with a European summer tour group, Young Methodist Youth from Iowa, of course. I was a young Republican. I campaigned for Ronald Reagan, even though I was too young to vote. I was a Methodist pastor candidate. I wanted to be a pastor and even go to refugee camps in Thailand or other places and work. And I was engaged to Beth, and we were going to have many children and farm. So that's how I came to Europe. It blew my socks off, but especially my blinders, or for the British, the blinkers, I think. We arrived at Amsterdam, already, the red light district. Like, this isn't Iowa anymore, is it? We went to Munich. We went to Dachau. I wasn't not out. I wasn't even aware, but we saw that gay people had been persecuted along with Jews, and there were 140,000 German men convicted and punished, and many died because they loved another man. We learned there that in East Germany, after the war, gay people didn't even get compensation like Jews did, or communists, or anybody else persecuted by the Nazis. Gay people got excluded. We went to Paris, to Rome, to London. In London, we saw punk rockers. Maybe for you, it's sort of quaint and silly, but for us, coming from the Midwest, these young people, mostly with Coca-Cola starched, what's Iroquois in English? Mohawks. They shocked us with the torn plaid shirts and the, Doc Marten boots. and safety pins in their cheeks. I've been thinking about this for a couple of days. As a cultural historian, I'd like to transport you to other worlds. You don't have to go very far. The 1980s, in the Midwest, most women didn't have pierced ears. They were just discovering pierced earrings. They were all wearing clamps, magnets, and little wheels you turned. This was a different world. And I mean, you don't have to do anything. You're independent people, but I would hope, I sort of plead you to think about, we come from really a different era and different place, and so much has happened. And even little things like that speak volumes. So these punk rockers like blew my circuit. Some of them seemed sort of campy and sensual with each other, the same gender, and I just stared and thought, what's going on? Also, some had tattoos. In the Midwest, the only people who had tattoo were ex-convicts. I'm not joking. Sailors and a few soldiers. My Uncle Jack had fought in Germany in World War II. He had a woman with high heels, 1940s haircut, with a skirt that ended just below her, and that was it. So tattoos were taboo, right? So this was like white bread. We're talking white bread, right? I was so impressed by that summer in Europe. We had a bus. We went all over from Inverness to Rome, and I went back, and very quickly all that fell away. I became not a young Republican anymore, but I was interested in socialism. I lost my Christianity by Christmas time and became a Quaker, which is another story, but you can be a Quaker, not a Christian, although it comes out of that. And I also had to take a walk with Beth and explain to her, I didn't tell her I was gay because I didn't know I was gay, that I realized in Europe I didn't know myself, so I couldn't know her, and realized also I didn't love myself, so I couldn't love her. She accepted that, and that was it. In 1981, I was so excited to have discovered Europe that I sold my tractor, I sold my calves, I sold my lambs, I sold my bees, my piglets, and I went to North Yorkshire to a boys' grammar school. I was a day boy, but there were also boarders. It was not far from where his grandparents had lived. We used to travel some of the same roads, Grassington, Skipton. I found that out. It's a small world, my love. It totally blew my mind. This was 1981. Also, pop music was popping. Culture Club and Boy George with Outrageous. I mean, all of this for me, my circuit boards were popping. And yet it was still the old England as well. The 2 times I called Iowa in a year, because you had to go to the post office and tell the clerk behind the counter the number and to go to a little booth. You couldn't just call America. You couldn't do it. A lot of people didn't have phones, right? So it was totally different. And here I was, and I was in this sea of boys, 500 boys with Harry Potter suits but no magic. And I fell in infatuation with a couple, but not knowing what it was. But I would not have acted on anything. You wouldn't dare. You still heard regularly pufter, fag. Some boys got teased and pushed in the schoolyard. On Friday nights, though, we went out to Black Horse Pub and Disco at the top of the high street across from the castle. The castle owner became a friend of mine. And there were 2 men who owned the pub, and everyone would sort of lower their voice and whisper, but there were no names, nobody talked about it. I was interested in what's going on. I became very active in the Quakers, CND, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, Amnesty International. I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but we'd get together, some volunteers, we'd write letters. There was no email, and you wouldn't call them, and you would send a letter to El Salvador or to Chile or to Turkey. Some of the people were not just political prisoners, they were homosexuals. That was the only word they used. And some of the people, the liberals, the white liberals in Skipton, they wouldn't write on behalf of homosexuals. So I said, I'll do that. I don't even know didn't really understand what that was all about. So.
How old were you at this point?
I was 17. The British Mothers for Peace sent me to the Soviet Union, February of '82. I met a Russian Jewish dissident, Sergei. We met in a park, and it was really cold because he was afraid his apartment was bugged with, little bugs. And he was also friendly, but it scared little former Methodist me. And this whole homophobia that I had taken on was so intact, even though I was trying desperately to learn about other ideas and reading Jonathan Dimbleby and Atwood, the whole evolution thing, and the BBC fascinated me because in Iowa we didn't have television that good. Are you okay? Okay. Fall of '82, I went back to Iowa. Still a virgin and still no idea what I really was. And I had said earlier this week that I organized the first UN International Day of Peace observance in Iowa. And one of the speakers was this cute Mark Dupont from GLA, Gays and Lesbians of Ames. A straight woman had pushed through and succeeded in Ames, Iowa, a gay and lesbian rights ordinance. No gay men would help her, and no lesbians would publicly help Susan, one of my former teachers. But she did it. A straight woman went on our behalf because none of us felt strong enough, except for Mark. So there was Mark giving his little talk about what human rights mean to gay people, and I watched him and thought, well, it doesn't seem lecherous, and he's not this, which I really didn't find very attractive at all. He wasn't any of that. A couple of days later, I called him and said, could we go for a walk? We met one night, we went for a walk, and it ended at late September 1982, summer night, ended up under a tree kissing wildly, and that was it. I told my roommate, Martin, we shared a room in this Mennonite Student Center, because Mennonites and Brethren and Quakers are sort of related theologically, and he moved out when I came out to another room. He was sure I was going to... And so this was my introduction to gay liberation. It was really political. You couldn't come out and it not be political. It wasn't possible. I mean, you could suck cock somewhere, you could go wherever, but that was something different. But to actually be open, very few of us were open. That was political. You didn't have a choice. All of us who came out in the early 80s, all of us knew that we might lose our families. And the chances were actually better that we would than we wouldn't. My father and I didn't speak for 8 years. We had a 20-minute break in the middle. We went for a walk, and I asked him why he always hated me, and he didn't say he didn't. He told me why. My mother, when they started talking about this gay cancer, I asked her, Mom, if I were to get sick, could I come home and take care of me? And she said, I'm not sure. I have to ask your father. I never got an answer. That was my mother. She later told me that when I came out, she had to choose between her husband and her son. I thought it was the wrong choice. I loved her, but she was simple and she was dependent on this asshole tyrant, right? I lost my mom. September 19th, I met this Mark character, very impressive, from Chicago. He'd grown up in Arizona. His parents had been graduates of Iowa State. That's why he was there. By Thanksgiving, my mom was doing dishes that Dad went out to do the chores. And I told her, in my classes, learning about Da Vinci and King James and all these other people who they were homosexuals and lesbians. And at some point she stopped and put the dishes down and turned and said, are you trying to tell me you think you're that? I said, yes. She said, get that out of your mind. You just think you are. By Christmas, I told my siblings. Debbie, my older sister, who's very bossy, told me that I was full of Satan. And David said I was a sex addict. Where I met Mark, he was the president of Gays and Lesbians of Ames. We met in a secluded Unitarian church, a little bit into the woods, and the students would only come at dark, so they wouldn't be seen. And then people in the community, there were some who between 25 and 40 who would come, but it was always under dark. And there would be a speaker. We were glad the Unitarians let us meet there, but everything was, without names. Everything was anonymous and sort of nervous. Most men in the Midwest, in the rural Midwest, in Iowa, over 25 and almost all over 30, were married with women or had been and had children. It's still that way in my cohort. They're now 60, 70. They all have adult children, grandchildren, but luckily they have boyfriends and husbands. Then I came out of fall of '82. March of '83, this gay cancer got worse, and then they had a word, it began with an A, and I think it ended with an S, and it scared the shit out of us. A lot of people who'd been in the fall coming to GLA stopped coming. They were afraid of being contaged. Gesundheit. Finding sex became really harder. We were all scared shitless. We didn't even want to touch each other. We were afraid. How is this being spread? Is it here? Is it here? A lot of the boys went back into the closet. Homophobia increased. We'd been always beaten and called names, but there was a new hostility, and we were beat up. Oh, you, I don't know what it was in English, a disease carrier, you, the woman in Ireland who passed all the diseases. Anyway, we got called things, kicked, and we began not to treat each other so gently either. This was during the Ronald Reagan years. There was such a stigma. Thousands died before Reagan, the president, even said the word AIDS in public. Had it been hepatitis, had it been pneumonia, had it been anything else, had it been, they would have called a national emergency. But they didn't do shit for us. They didn't do anything. They didn't do shit. I'll fast forward. I think I have 3 minutes left. This homophobia, and I did research tonight, that's what I was doing while you were here. It was so pervasive. Tom Hanks had to play a man with AIDS in Philadelphia in 1993 with Denzel Washington as his lawyer. The lawyer was homophobic in the film and didn't want to even help him, but was a losing lawyer and wanted a case. They couldn't get a gay actor to do it. No real gay men would play a gay character, neither in Hollywood and often in Broadway. It wasn't, you had to find a brave straight guy. I'd forgotten that these things in the 90s, which for him and me, the 90s were yesterday, but for you must be before your birth. 1998, Matthew Shepard. Anybody know who Matthew Shepard was? It was a turning point. He was a lovely, sweet boy in Wyoming who was taken out and hung to die on a barbed wire fence like a scarecrow by two homophobic shits. At that point, we said it's enough. There had been a national march on Washington in 1979. Harvey Milk was supposed to organize it. He got assassinated for being openly gay. It took 6 years to have a national march in Washington. I wasn't there. It had 100,000 people. Our Gay Pride in Des Moines, the first one, I was there. It had maybe 50 people. Gay Pride had 50 people. There were more people on the sidewalk watching, and most of them were gay and lesbian than in the parade. They wouldn't join us. And we would say, come on, they wouldn't do it. I did go to the 87 march in Washington. We had 750,000 people. The National Park, whatever it's called, service counted, supposedly. And how did we go? We were so eager to come out and be proud. We slept in school buses we chartered, and we slept under the seats. It was dirty and cold and shaky, but we got to Washington. Gay marriage began to arise parallel to this AIDS thing. One of the arguments was if we're in committed monogamous relationships, AIDS won't spread like it's been spreading. This was a 23-year-old fight. I Googled all this, of course, because a historian checks his or her facts. It took 23 years. Iowa was the third state to have gay marriage. So watch what you say about Iowa. 2004. Let me come to an end. All right. Only in 2015, 10 years ago, did we have a national gay marriage law. And I don't want to be grotesque, but back what I said when I began, the Baptists want to overturn that. It's conceivable. If we've only had a national law for a decade, we had Roe versus Wade since the 70s. That was 50 years. They overturned a 50-year-old precedent. They can overturn a 10-year-old. Finally, I'll cut the other things. I will say that what we had today in the meadow, we wouldn't have dreamt of that. I was there, gay lib in the 80s. We thought we'd fuck our way to freedom. Really, it wasn't about cruising and nice malls and consumer goods and all that. It was about being genuine and loving, authentic, and we thought fucking would bashed the patriarchy and all the things you talk about, we would fuck our way to freedom. And today I sat and I watched and I thought, wow, this is amazing.